Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada, we love you. In Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful September the 16th, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, I woke up confused this morning. There were so many football games on over the weekend, I lost track of days. I thought I had a doctor's appointment. I show up, they tell me I'm there on the wrong day. So I ended up at a bakery and put on some pounds.
Yeah, I understand. That could be the little bit of moonshine, Big C. I know you good old boys party down south, but it's all fair in love and war. What a great day in sports. It wasn't really the best for college football, but there's some great games going on in the NFL, and the referees are making themselves more known, Big C. I think 2 games were lost by some referee malfeasance, if you call it that. College football, what do you know? The Pac-12 has a couple of guys alive, Big C, but I don't know if they're ranked high enough to make any difference. I do want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell Charlton and Big C sent you. So I know as far as the football goes, everybody can always say we need better officiating. We have electronics now, Big C, to make sure things get right. But if we can't use electronics to make sure that San Diego's not called or having a game taken away from a bad call, it also happened in the Saints, even though the Saints lost by more than just that play. And then the thing with the Bears, there's something that happened with the Bears also. I mean, was that the time was off the clock? I just want to get your thoughts, Big C.
Well, the more things change, the more things get egregious, Charlton, is you're sitting there. And the problem with replay is that you have too many eyes on the replay. You have the officials. You have New York. You have the fans in the stands. You have the fans at home.
Vegas.
We all see it in one replay.
Yeah.
The problem is that they want to run it too many times.
Yeah.
You should get 3 bites at the apple max. Really, 2 is all is needed. If you don't see it, that you can confirm it originally, you can slow anything down frame by frame to make a judgment call or an adjustment on something. But as we've gotten more and more involved in relying on technology, that has become the problem in sports, is that everybody wants the replay, whether it's a coach throwing a challenge flag, whether it's the official saying something's under review. We all see the problems that are created. I mean, you talked about the Saints game. The Saints don't want to see another official anytime soon, especially in playing the Rams.
Right.
Because the things that have happened to them over the past couple of seasons, I mean, it's been totally egregious, and everybody witnessed it. You watch a fumble, then all of a sudden they blow the whistle on it.
Halfway down the field.
It's an incomplete pass. Why is the whistle so quick?
Yeah.
Let things play out. That's what sports is all about. Let the athletes play the game. Make whatever decision you want to make after the play.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Vegas is closer to Los Angeles than it is to Louisiana, but that's true. I mean, it's all fair and love and war. I do want to say Big C Sports is brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You hear from our sponsors. You're here. Welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. Big C, I was talking to another veteran today, and very impressed with the hotline that we have, and I told him that Big C said it. And so I'm glad that it's not our hotline, but it's something that you brought to the show. Now a lot of programs are doing it. National Suicide Hotline, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important again? Your thoughts?
Charlton, it is important because we have so many great people in this country that are in need, and they feel that there's no place for them to turn to. One of the things we have as Americans is that everybody puts a stigma on somebody who feels that they're in need of mental or social help. Charlton saying that they're weak or they're unworthy.
Yeah.
And so this is a line that people can call in anonymity. You call it in private, Charlton. You speak to people that can assist you, people that don't pass judgment. We're too much of a judgmental society. and that forces people to do heinous things to themselves and even others.
Yeah.
So to have this national suicide hotline out there to reach out and help anybody in America, it was set up for American veterans who we lose some 20 a day due to suicide, but we also have adolescents and young adults and teenagers that are doing the same horrific things to themselves, Charlton. We live in such a negative, bullying society that we haven't learned enough on how to be kind to each other in this country.
Yeah.
So the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is there, Charlton, for the people to reach out to.
Yeah, I know everybody has, we hear about going to war again, and I don't know. It's just hard to, it's one thing to say thoughts and prayers with people, but we really got to make sure that people who survive that stuff, Big C, I know we're free because of sacrifice. I want to make sure, and I love the fact that you gave it a hotline, and I'm feeling it more and more because the more and more I hear about it, there's more and more people talk about it, and it's good to see that there's help. I was just getting some gas today, and I don't know, sometimes you don't look at things because you're just focused on your own life, but I saw a guy, and maybe he wasn't military, but he did have a hat that says U.S. Army, and he's digging through the garbage can to get some plastic bottles. Maybe he likes to recycle. But that's just a shame that you fight for the country, and that's how you end up. I do want to say that people can reach out to that number and get some help, 800-273-8255, or text 838-255. Big C, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I want to get into some high school football for Big C's Friday Night Lights. We talk about money, and we talk about games, and how people don't want to pay the NCAA players, Big C. Well, high school football took place again. This time it was Saturday night, and that's when colleges kick off. It was number one in the country, Mater Dei Santa Ana, two-time defending national champions. They took on East Coast Power, St. Francis Academy out of Baltimore, Maryland, and they're the number 2 team in the country. And Mater Dei won at 34-18. But the point is, Big C, that game, these are high school kids, 17, 18, maybe some 16. It ended at about 1:20 a.m. California time. That's not healthy on the body clock, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is the exploitation of high school athletes who, I have never advocated for, Charlton. The thing about growing up playing high school sports decades ago, Charlton, is that we played local rivals. I mean, a travel time to a game, I think the longest we ever had maybe was a 2.5-hour trip to a team out of the district, and that was a serious game. But also, we spent the night in that town, Charlton, because, after the game, it was too much to ask for kids to get back on one of those old yellow school buses and bring them back home.
Yeah.
But when we got kids flying across the country, Charlton, you got to deal with the biological change of the body clock and all of those things, adaptation to a new environment. I think they're putting too much stress on these kids at an early age for economic gain of people that are not the children.
Yeah, and that's a funny thing that you bring, because when I was, and again, I know progress happens and money will rule everything. That's just a fact. But when I was growing up, there used to be a sign or an announcement that came over the news stations. It would say, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Yeah, for the high school kids from Maryland, they were playing football until 1:20 in the morning in California. But I love the game, but I think that's way too late. St. Francis Academy, they suffered the first loss in 3 years. And this high school football game ended, like we said, about 1:20 in the morning, East Coast time. And Mater Dei has beaten 4 of the USA's top 4 ranked high school football programs from Florida. They stopped what's called IMG Academy, stopped their 40-game win streak. They also stopped Bishop Gorman out of Nevada, their 55-game win streak. And now they just knocked off Maryland Power, St. Francis, as well as a couple of teams in California, St. John Bosco and De La Salle. But these schools are all private. For the most part, Big C, all of their players are African American. Now, I know we talk about getting free education and good education for African Americans, but isn't it amazing? Most of these programs are in white school districts, but they'll have an almost all-black student body, or at least on the athletic field. Is that more exploitation, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, isn't high school education free to everybody, Charlton? It's in government entitlement to have free education throughout America, you know, from kindergarten all the way through high school.
Not in private schools.
When you look at this, Charlton, it's as much the parents' blame as it is the institutional blame, Charlton.
Yeah.
Everybody's in it for money. You know, parents are saying, I want my child to be a professional athlete. They're not sitting there looking at the statistical numbers. They're just sitting there saying, hey, this presents the best opportunity.
Yeah.
If you go to college and prove yourself, Charlton, it's not about the high school competition that you compete against. It's about the college competition you compete against.
Yeah. Well, we say that, Big C. 98 players from IMG Academy High School in Bradenton, Florida. 98 players are playing D1 football over the last 4 years. 98 over the last 4 years from one high school, all playing D1. There's a lot going on. I think the Nike sponsoring a lot of those programs. I want to jump into the world of college football where there's still this talk. Even guys like Tim Tebow, who I know he must have gotten something under the table down in Florida, Big C, saying he doesn't want guys to get paid. I mean, come on. That's just not honest, Big C. But I want to ask you, the big winners in college football this weekend. It's a small state, and I know weather also played a part. But Iowa defeating Iowa State after a 2-hour rain delay, it was 18-7, Big C. It was a great game, but it's almost, if you have thunder and lightning, is it really that important to stop a game for 2 or 3 hours? They did the same thing out in Washington when they played Cal Berkeley, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, there's always a lot of risk to the athletes, Charlton, that you sit them back in the locker room for 2.5 to 3 hours after the game has started. You stop the game because of the weather situation, Charlton. But that's what the finances is all about. It's so important for teams to finish up the game so they can get that television revenue that they've signed up for. But the game was just a great game. When you think about an in-state rival, Charlton, they play for the Sockeye trophy that they have, and Iowa now has won that trophy 5 consecutive years, and they're taking it back home. But just a great competitive game. Kids that grew up playing against each other, half each one of these teams' rosters was that. But just the pride of having the state championship is a great thing in college football.
Amazing. Also, it happened, and there was a similar situation, the Penn State and Pittsburgh game, and Penn State had them, I mean, it was nail-biting, Big C. Pittsburgh had a chance to go up, and they could have tied the game and tried to go to overtime, but they tried to win it with a 2-point conversion, and they lost it. And I know people say the coach should be whatever, the coach's fault, but I like when a coach tries to win. I remember watching an Arizona versus Cal Berkeley game when Dick Tomey was the head coach at Arizona about 20 years ago, and that they went into like 5 or 6 overtimes, Big C. And I think that started like the overtime era in college football, how they put the ball on the 20-yard line. But I thought it's great that you try to go for it even if you come up short, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think every athlete that's a competitor goes out there to win. I mean, ties are not losses, but they're not victories either. And at the end of the day, Charlton, you want to win a title, a division, or something in college football.
Yeah.
Pitt, knowing that this opportunity against Penn State was going to be limited. If you look at Penn State, this is the team that came into the game averaging some 59, 61 points a game.
Yeah.
Pitt hung in there and played great defense. And the coach gave the kids an opportunity to win the game. Coaches call plays.
Yeah.
It's up to the players to execute the plays. And sometimes you got to man up if you want to win. And this time, Pitt just didn't have it at the goal line.
Yeah, didn't have it at the goal line. Now, I know some things going on in Florida State, and, with their coaching situation, they got a loss to Virginia. I like to see where coaches can play out the season, but I don't think people wanted Taggart to be the coach a long time. This talks about him. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I don't know if it's always fair, but staying in the state of Florida, University of Central Florida, they jumped on Stanford 45-17. Stanford's got banged up, and it's a shame because Stanford does things the right way. At least we hope so, academically, Big C. And they've been the most successful Pac-12 team as far as win-rise over the last 5 years. I know they lost to USC 45-20, and then they fly across the country and play a game in the humidity of Florida, and they lose to Central Florida 45-17. But just give me your thoughts on what's going on with teams going across the country playing early, losing, but they're academically successful. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, academically successful, athletically, Charlton, they were outmanned by Central Florida. When you look at what Central Florida did to Stanford, they manhandled. There was no doubt about who was the better athletes on the field that day.
Yeah.
We can talk about injuries, but everybody's playing the same amount of games. Central Florida, they won 27 consecutive regular season games. They lost a bowl game last year to LSU, but they were without their top quarterback.
Yeah.
But now, Charlton, they have a 3-headed monster back there playing quarterback. And you can see the differential between the tremendous athletes in the state of Florida versus what they had in California. And this is why you get such a migration out of California now with the top athletes wanting to go to programs that are elitist. You got to put Central Florida, and I don't care what the coaches say, they actually need to be in the top 10. because you're not going to find 10 teams more dominant than them right now in college football.
Yeah, well, their score was similar to the USC game against Stanford, and that brings me to this point. Lynn Swann stepped down, kind of a hush-hush about it, but USC goes in to Utah at Provo, and I know they have a quarterback. Everybody has an excuse, right? But BYU, for the second consecutive week, they rallied for a come-from-behind victory versus the Power 5 conference team. They did it to Tennessee, and then they come home and do it to USC 30-27. But it was the interceptions that caused the game. But you just got to credit them, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the interceptions come from having a great defensive scheme, Charlton. Yeah. Putting things out there that a young quarterback is not going to recognize, and Solvis had his hands full. The thing about the game that USC had against Stanford is that, Charlton, this young quarterback had not really been under pressure.
Right.
Or maybe Stanford's just that bad. We saw what happened to them down in Central Florida where they got their hats handed to them.
Yep.
But they go into BYU, who had an opportunity to prepare for this quarterback for a week, so they knew what his pitfalls were.
Yeah.
And they put in a great defensive scheme, but you got to give all the credit in the world to the BYU.
Yeah.
They go down to Knoxville, knock off Tennessee. They come back in overtime and win that game.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the fortitude of the BYU players.
Yeah.
They get USC at home. They're wanting another big boy to come in.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Charlton, they take him into overtime and win. But they make the plays defensively to shut down that USC offense.
Yeah, and even though people think, BYU, that's an upset. Well, BYU has also won a national championship in their past, and they've knocked off Miami in the past that came in there from Florida when they were rolling high. They've gotten some good teams over the years, so congratulations to BYU. I also want to go to Les Miles and the Kansas Jayhawks. They defeated the Boston College Eagles on the road. That's not that much of a shock, but the fact that it was 48-24 in Boston, Big C, that's a shock. Your thoughts?
Oh, no, Charlton, it was a huge shock. You got to understand, Kansas went into this game as a 24-point underdog.
Yeah.
And they won by 24 points. So that's a 48-point swing. Nobody had picked Kansas to win this game. Les Miles, not only that, Charlton, Kansas had lost 48 consecutive Power 5 games on the road.
Yeah.
Think about that. 48 consecutive Power 5 games on the road. So there was nobody in this program that had won a game on the road against a Power 5 school since they've been in Kansas.
Yeah.
So you got to give a lot of credit to Les Miles. This guy spent 3 years out of college football in the broadcast booth and doing commercials.
Yeah.
He has gone out to Kansas, and he has made a change in this program. You have to change the mindset of players to get a program on track.
Yeah.
He had great success at LSU. Now he seems to have worked a little bit of magic out there on the plains in Kansas.
Well, it's amazing. I'm not surprised because he has championship pedigree, but the fact that sometimes all it takes is a coach to come in and change things around, and that's what happens. But let me get your thoughts too. If Boston College, and then you have, they're part of if they can play with Syracuse and they can play with, Virginia, and sometimes even Clemson at times. Do you think that this makes a relevant program in Kansas in the Big 12, Big C? Your thoughts?
I don't think it makes them relevant, Charlton, because you're looking at a conference that possesses Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech, Kansas State. You have a lot of powers in that conference, Charlton, that have played in bowl games over the decade consistently and even been in the national championship playoffs.
Yeah.
It's a long road for Kansas. I think a solid season for Kansas would be 4 to 5 wins. That means that Les Miles is putting his blueprint on the program. But you can't get all giddish over a couple of wins early, but it's great for the kids at Kansas.
Yeah, well, that's great for kids at Kansas, but I also want to bring up, as we look at Florida State and the things that they're going through with their coach Taggart. And again, you can be hired and fired. People want an opportunity, and you got to take the good with the bad. University of Virginia, they trail Florida State by 21 points in the fourth quarter, and they rally for a 31-24 victory. And of course, like any program, the people are calling for Taggart's head, Big C. I always think just they were doing it for Helton at USC also last year, and maybe now this year. I say let them play out their contract because they recruited kids, and the kids went there because they thought they'd be there. Your thoughts?
Well, they recruit kids, but also when you look at the previous coach, Jimbo Fisher, he recruited a lot of kids in the program.
Yeah.
Kids are always expecting a coach to be there. But these programs are about satisfying the boosters and making the money come in, Charlton. When you sit there in the stadium, and especially down in Tallahassee, and the stadium's only half full, the organization, which is the university, they start looking at these things, Charlton. It's a financial endeavor when you come to college athletes. Also, when you look at the lack of productivity of this Florida State program, that means that the coaches lost control. When the players are disorganized, they're not aware of what they're doing on the field. They're lining up in the wrong position. They're taking unnecessary penalties, Charlton. That comes from a lack of discipline. You have to instill discipline in a program. We just talked about Les Miles in Kansas. You come in, you change the mindset of a program that hasn't won on the road against a Power 5 team in 48 games. You're talking about close to a decade when you look at the landscape of college football. And all of a sudden, he's changed that. On the road, he goes out and do it. So that's what Willie Taggart has to do. We talked about Central Florida, how the landscape has changed down there. How powerful that program is. They just went out and throttled Kansas. I mean, not Kansas, but Stanford. Stanford had no answer for anything Central Florida was doing. Florida State has no answer for anything that they're doing or not doing.
I guess it's all part of life. You take the good with the bad. But we played to win the game. The Great Herm Everett's, Arizona State, the Sun Devils, they defeat Michigan State and East Lansing by the score of 10-7. And it was a low-scoring game from teams that can score a lot. I know Michigan State has a good defense, but it stopped Antonio from becoming Michigan State's all-time winningest head coach. And he was complaining about some calls, but who doesn't complain about calls in the game? That's a big win for Arizona State. Big, your thoughts?
It was a huge win for Arizona State, Charlton, but also two different calls cost this game and cost Michigan State an opportunity to win the game. I mean, Arizona State was able to come back late in the game and take the lead, but Michigan State drove down. They missed the field goal because they had 12 men on the field. But also, Arizona State launched over trying to block the field goal attempt, Charlton, which should have been a penalty. So when we look at all these egregious calls and non-calls from these athletes, why even have replay at any time? Because when I'm sitting here and I'm watching the officials blow stuff in real time, and you can't even go back and figure out what you've blown in real time, slow down,
with
replay.
The camera.
It's bad for sports, period.
Well, prop betting is good for sports. The replay and prop bet, they're not mutually exclusive. One has to go, Big C, and we know that prop bet's not going to go. So when I think about my favorite programs out here, because I got to advocate for the West, because nobody else is, Big C. But when I look at teams, USC went down to BYU. Colorado lost to Air Force. And then you have, obviously, USC losing. UCLA, they didn't look like they were even in the same Rose Bowl that Oklahoma was in. And it's hard to keep saying, if this and if that, we need new coaches, we need new whatever. But you think about it. Has the Pac-12 already been eliminated from the college football playoffs? They have 4 undefeated teams left. Cal Berkeley, Washington State got a big win over Houston. Arizona State got the big win over Michigan State. And then Utah with a solid win. But they all face each other this season. It makes it tough, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, all of them will eliminate each other, Charlton. One of those 4 teams would have to run the table. Washington State has the best offense of those 4 teams that you named. Utah is the highest ranked. And, I saw in the polls where they had Washington ranked ahead of Cal, and Cal had beat Washington. So I think they're playing with the Pac-12 mentally saying, hey, we're going to toss you a bone that you think that you're competitive. But when you put a team ahead of a team that beat them in the rankings, I don't know what you're looking at. But when you have the inconsistency in the Pac-12, and like I said, Washington with Gordon has the greatest offense that they have out there under Mike Leach. The rest of the teams, I mean, it's a turkey shoot as far as the Pac-12. But when you look at it, who really notices what they're doing? When you have the guys who have been the signature programs in UCLA and USC get beat up on the weekend, and they even had to give away seats in the Rose Bowl for that UCLA-Oklahoma game, Charlton, and people still refuse to show up.
You know, what I saw as a solution, if you go from Westwood to the Rose Bowl, it's just about 30 miles, but in essence, that's about an hour in good traffic, hour and a half in LA traffic. The new stadium in Inglewood that the Rams and the Chargers will share, they're only going to play it on Sundays. Westwood is only about 11 miles from Inglewood. That's where all their fans could jump on the shuttle and be at the game. as opposed to having to go an hour and a half from Westwood to the Rose Bowl to try to get 50,000 people into a 90,000-seat stadium. I know people say, well, there's something about the tradition. That's a bad look when you're on national TV and the stadium's half full, but that's part of what the Pac-12 has to figure out. We're going to come up on what's called the Big C pause, and as we come back from the Big C pause, we're going to get into some NFL football, and I really love what's happening with NFL football. We hope you'll love it too. We'll come right back out in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on an app that I really love called Alexa. And you can also follow us on Xfinity Comcast Television. I really love the progress that we're making, Big C. I want to get in some football. And when you think about it, some of these top players, like Julio Jones, and people say, why pay Julio Jones? Julio Jones last night in Atlanta, it was a playoff atmosphere with the Eagles, and it always is. But they escaped with a 24-20 win. Julio Jones, 5 receptions, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns, a 54-yard touchdown catch and run on a 4th and 3, and he averaged over 21 yards per catch. Big C, that's why you signed Julio Jones. Your thoughts?
Well, he had an outstanding game, Charlton, a much-needed win for the Falcons, you know, against the Eagles. These teams have played a couple of epic games over the last 3 years, and this was no exception. But when I look at the Eagles, Charlton, this was like a mash unit.
Yeah.
I mean, they had all of their receivers at one point knocked out of the game. So, I mean, they were playing, you know, from behind from the start. Even Carson Wentz went out of the game for a while. So this was a much-needed game by the Falcons. I mean, they needed some help from their offensive line, which they got a little bit, but they lost another starting offensive lineman last night. But the Falcons seemed healthy for once at home and came out with a victory.
Yeah, that's a great stadium. It's a great environment down in Atlanta. It's good that they got the win because you're at home, and they should win those games at home, especially against the Eagles. Big C, I want to ask you, as we get into more NFL football, think about the NFL QB passing yards. Week 1, I know you like this guy, Patrick Mahomes, 443 yards, followed up by number 2, Kyler Murray, 349 yards. Number 3, Cam Newton, 333 yards. Matt Ryan had 320. Andy Dalton had 311. And then Russell Wilson had 300 yards passing. So out of those 6, I think, if my math is right, 4 are African Americans. Not that matters, but I just wanted to bring that up. Give me your thoughts on the quarterbacks, Big C.
Well, that is true. Everyone in the media and all the experts want to say, you know, you want to put these guys in a different position.
Yeah.
When you look at Week 2 in the NFL, and half of the leading passers in the league, Charlton, are African-American. When you talked about, you know, when you talked about Mr. Mahomes out there in Kansas City, you talked about Kyler Murray, who was just a rookie, who was behind him, Russell Wilson, 300 yards passing, Charlton. So as you look at these elite quarterbacks in the NFL, and African-Americans each week on the top statistical list. Last week it was Dak Prescott on the top of the yardage list. So every week the involvement of the African-American athlete, Charlton, in the NFL is just growing.
And also, I got to bring up, just because it's important, because if we don't mention it, then it won't. And I'm a big advocate for people. I really want to see more African-Americans in media. I know people might say, well, why you got to bring this up? Because if I don't, nobody will. When I watch NFL football games, where are the African-American play-by-play announcers? I mean, they may have an analyst, which is a former athlete, but there's a lot of guys who can do it. You have people that no one even knows, and it's because the Good Old Boy Network gives them a job. You rarely see African-Americans announcing, and I want to change that, Big C. I also want to bring up another performance that I think goes without saying, because now many people are saying what you were saying last year. You were saying that Jackson was a stud. He was a real deal, Lamar Jackson, for the Baltimore Ravens. People were saying, why would they let go of Flacco for this guy? Well, think of what he did. We know what he did in Week 1. But yesterday, he was 24-37, 272 yards, Big C, and 2 touchdowns. He also had 120 yards rushing. He's the first quarterback, listen up, mainstream, that said he should be wide receiver or DB. He's the first quarterback in franchise history with 7 touchdown passes through 2 games. And had he followed mainstream's example, he would have been a defensive back, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, all of that goes back to the brilliance of Ozzie Newsome, who was once the general manager of the Baltimore Ravens, and also John Harbaugh, the head coach, in following the blueprint that Ozzie Newsome laid out there in front of him.
Yep.
To understand talent, to know what the makeup of his city was and how he needed to build a team that the city would get behind.
Yeah.
He knew it was time to cut bait with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is 0-2 this year as a starting quarterback.
Yep.
And at the pace that they were last year in Baltimore, they were not going to make the playoffs. Lamar Jackson is now 9-1 as a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Wow.
And he's, as you said, 7 touchdowns in his last 2 games, and a dual threat, Charlton, that puts pressure on the defense all the time.
Yeah, and just to tell you how dominant he was, because we all about Google it. If there's any legacy that Big C Sports leave behind, we're not always right, but I think we're right about 95% of the time. You can Google that too. But when you think about this guy that was told, well, we don't know if he has the intelligence, or we don't know if he can throw the long ball, we don't know if his accuracy is good. The guy was a Heisman Trophy winner. NFL top rushers week 2. Number 1, Dalvin Cook, 154 yards. Number 3, Matt Breida, 121 yards. Number 3, Lamar Jackson, 120 yards. The same guy that most teams said should play quarterback or defensive back. You got to start looking at those broadcasters that fed you that garbage and say, why are you still listening to him? Aaron Jones, 116 yards. Ezekiel Elliott, 111 yards. Saquon Barkley, 107 yards. Big C, he outperformed guys that are considered MVP quality guys in Elliott and Barkley. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about what all those top rushers have in common in the NFL in week 2, Charlton, they're all African American.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson was able to put up quarterback quality numbers throwing the football, Charlton, but also put up running back quality numbers in running the ball. So when you think about the disadvantage that he puts on a defense that's trying to defend the Baltimore Ravens,
yeah,
where he also has Mark Ingram in the backfield to hand the ball off to, swing it out to, and the receiving core that he has, Hollywood Brown has really stepped up, the rookie from Oklahoma. I saw Mr. Jackson drop a couple dimes during that game,
amazing.
Charlton,
Yep.
that I don't care who the quarterback has been throughout the NFL history. They were not going to throw a better ball.
Yeah, he's amazing, Big C. And so it's a sad dog that won't wag his own tail. And I just want people to understand, you got to Google what Big C's been saying the last 2 years, because everybody else is saying, well, you know what, maybe he can perform. We were saying that when he was in college. Now mainstream's getting on board. Big C, NFL top receivers week 2. DeMarcus Robinson, 172 yards. Tyler Boyd, 122 yards. Chris Goodwin, 121. Cooper Kupp had an amazing run at the Coliseum, 120 yards in receiving. Kenny Galladay, 117. And Christian Kirk, 114. Cooper Kupp's run, his catch and run, was so amazing, they called it a touchdown, and then they went to the replay, and they said the ball was maybe on the 1 foot line. That's when replay was right, because they got it right, even though it was an amazing run. If they get it right on that, why can't they get it right on other things? But give me your thoughts on the top receivers, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, the amazing thing about Cooper Kupp, Charlton, this guy came back from a major ACL tear,
right.
and he was an integral part of the Rams' offense last year when they were rolling. And now that he's back to go along with Woods out there on the outside, Charlton, this guy, you know, is an amazing. Come from a small school, Eastern Washington, went undrafted, signed as a free agent with the Rams. But as you look at those receivers, Charlton, with those top flight numbers,
yeah,
I mean, you think about the kid, the first one you called off from the Chiefs.
Yeah.
An amazing game against the Raiders, Charlton, just electrifying. Patrick Mahomes goes to anybody and everybody. It's always next man up in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You don't know who to defend.
Yeah, I'm just impressed. I saw a lot of good football played this weekend, and I'm really happy that we have it back. And it's early in the season. It's a shame after week 2 we have Roethlisberger out for the season, and then Breeze maybe out for a couple of months, Big C. And both of these players, Roethlisberger wasn't even touched when he hurt his elbow, and then Breeze just got his hand hit, and I think it was Donald. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the situation with Roethlisberger, they said that the shoulder was injured in the game versus New England in week 1, Charlton. And you could see the problems that he was having with his throwing motion. But this is also an easy out for Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh, yeah.
I think Ben, as much as anything, saw that the demise of the offense with the Steelers, and he didn't want to be the guy to blame for it because he no longer has Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell, and everybody was going to halfway through the season when the Steelers had only won 2 games, they could only point their fingers at Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
I think that was as much of this situation as anything else. The situation with Drew Brees, very unfortunate incident. We've always seen quarterback injure their hands on a player's helmet. This time he caught it in the mid of Aaron Donald, dislocated the thumb, tore some ligaments. Charlton had surgery on it today, and will be out 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's a shame. But it's just a matter of time with technology. I don't know if they're a playoff team now. They have too many games on the road to do that. But I want to just also tip my hat to the 49ers. I'm still not big on Garoppolo yet. I know their defense played well, and something's up with Cincinnati. I guess Marvin Lewis wasn't the problem after all, Big C. The 49ers roll over the Bengals 41-17. Garoppolo had a career-high 3 touchdowns, but also threw an interception. Also had a long touchdown pass where the guy was open. I mean, there was no one within 15 yards of the receiver. So Cincinnati's a bad team. They played 2 bad teams, and the defenses carry them, even though he'll get credit. But you think about Matt Breida control of the game on the ground for the Niners when the 41-17 win. I just think that Cincinnati's a bad team, though, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is so much for Zach Taylor, the head coach of Cincinnati, the quarterback whisperer that was there with McVay in Los Angeles, and everybody said that Marvin was the problem in Cincinnati and that Zach Taylor would come in there and right the ship, right off the back. He's 0-2.
Yeah.
And so I don't see anyhow where that's a better record than Marvin Lewis would have had.
No, not in my math, Big C. Another guy that gets a win, but the Chargers got robbed, Big C. They got robbed in the Dome. Matthew Stafford overcomes a mistake to help the Lions stop the Chargers 13-10, and he threw the go-ahead, I think it was 31-yard touchdown pass to Kenny Golladay midway through the 4th. And then there was an interception in the end zone with 103 remaining. It helped the Lions beat the Chargers. But the Chargers also had a play. It was a long run, and it was called back on a play. And even the TV guys were saying, well, we don't see the penalty. But obviously the officials heard the prop bet, and they called a penalty anyway. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the thing about football, you can call a holding on any play. Something it happens. It's a matter of whether the fans see it or not. There's always a holding. There's something goes on every play in the NFL. It's up to the officials whether they want to hold the flags or drop the flags. But the game is to be played. Everybody always looks at the one play when sometimes they figure that's what decided the outcome of the game, Charlton. You got 60 minutes to go out there and put a team away where it doesn't come down to one play.
Yeah. Well, you can never make anybody happy in this, and that's what makes the game great. That's why I don't like instant replay. Let the guys who are in it, they're in it. They got paper bags handed to them too, Big C. I always will believe that because I talked to enough people to know that. Get rid of the replay. Just let it be human error. That way we can't make the officials look bad. Aaron Rodgers, 2 early touchdown passes. Green Bay Packers, they hold off the Vikings 21-16 on Sunday. Kirk Cousins had another lackluster performance. Kirk Cousins is rolling to his right. They got him $80 million. Rolling to his right, throws off his back to the corner of the end zone and gets a pick. I mean, the team is amazing. He was 14 of 32, 1 touchdown, and he threw 2 interceptions. And they'll still say, well, this is a guy that we need in Minnesota. Doesn't make any sense, Big C. Your thoughts?
It comes down to the fact of what $84 million can do for you. It keeps you comfortable. You don't have any pressure. You're not even worried about being benched.
Wow.
You think about what Dalvin Cook did in week 1 and week 2 for the Minnesota Vikings. You got to learn how to ride that horse.
Is he still on the team?
He's the best part of the Minnesota offense.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins still cannot beat a team with a winning record.
No.
The Packers won in week 1. They went into the game with a winning record.
Yep.
And they won in week 2. Kirk Cousins is still the same old Kirk Cousins.
Do they know that he threw 10 passes and they won? Okay? Think about that. 10 passes and they won. They still have Cook in the backfield. But it's about how do we make the quarterback look good? You make it look good by having him hand off the ball. Everyone's proclaiming the Colts season was over. Jacoby Brissett rolled into Tennessee, and they beat the Titans 19-17. BC, he had 3 touchdown passes, even though he's much maligned. Your thoughts?
Well, he's much maligned, and Adam Vinatieri missed some extra points in the game, but he's still going to be the kicker in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Everyone said, the coach should be looking at a rebuilding. Jacoby Brissett is a quality quarterback. Bill Belichick didn't draft him for no reason whatsoever, and then he traded him and got some assets out of it.
Yeah.
And Indianapolis is lucky to have him. He stepped in Indianapolis, 2 years ago, but Indianapolis had no offensive line. And we saw what he did against San Diego in week 1. The team just got too far behind.
Yep.
But we also saw what he did when he got a start against Tennessee in the divisional game, Charlton. He propelled his team to victory.
Yeah. Well, I love when the underdog wins. I just feel there's something about the underdog. You have nothing to lose, and you're going to get criticized even when you win, but at least he has the opportunity to earn it on the field. The Miami Dolphins, they laid an egg at home versus the Patriots, and there's the 43-0 loss. Really could have been 27-0. But Kirkpatrick, I thought he felt that he was auditioning for the New England Patriots, Big C, as many times he threw the ball. And then running backs that catch a ball out of the backfield, you're taught even from Pop Warner, bat the ball down if you can't grab it. Here's a guy, I think he was number 27, batting the ball up in the air like he's ready for the tip drill. To me, there's a lot of shenanigans in that loss. I don't care what anybody says. That's a team that was not trying to win, Big C. You think about the Patriots on track to go 16-0 now, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you look at the Dolphins in this game, Charlton. Ryan Fitzpatrick, a year ago, in that same weekend, threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns when he was quarterbacking Tampa.
Same guy.
This game against New England, he threw for 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions. So I don't see anybody on the Dolphins team, Charlton, trying to win. I know players are talking about they want to be traded and thus forth. People are not going to absorb players into a salary cap, Charlton. They can't do that.
No.
The Dolphins, as a man, have to play harder. You can't just blame it on the coach or situations. You're out there as a player. If you don't mind being embarrassed, then keep playing lackluster football.
Yeah. Well, I just tell you, and I know I'm not one to say that guys are tanking, but those guys are tanking, Big C. I mean, that's just how I look at it. To me, that's what it seems like. When you look at a guy who's not tanking, and I know we've even jumped on this guy a couple of times, but when you talk about the Kings of New York, the Buffalo Bills in a 28-14 victory over the Giants, I'm not saying Eli's tanking. That's not even making any sense. But the Giants are taking. That organization is willing to tell the fan base of the New York Giants, one of the best in the history of the NFL universe, that they're willing to ride Eli Manning. They're willing to take him, and they're willing to lose. Because they're losing to a team that has a quarterback in his second year that's not that good, but they made him look good. And I thought that Eli Manning would not be the starter going into October, but they'll let him ride through September. That's just my thoughts, Big C, if they don't win. Your thoughts?
Well, I think Eli Manning might get one more game at best at quarterback in the New York Giants. I know there's going to be a lot of cry to play Daniel Jones. You spent a first-round draft pick on him. But Eli Manning is just struggling. I mean, you can only live on your lore for so long.
Yeah.
Those 2 Super Bowls were ancient time ago when you think about those 2 giant victories, Charlton. He hasn't done anything productivity-wise in the last 5 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
You can no longer blame Odell Beckham Jr. as being a distraction to the team, Charlton. Right now, Eli Manning is the distraction to the New York Giants.
Well, Big C, I love when players can play, but it's not fair to the organization, and all the guys it's not fair to Barkley. When you drafted him number 1 last year, and now he has to get a handoff from a guy who you know he can't throw the ball, so that's going to make his career more in jeopardy. Russell Wilson, on the other hand, he told the Seahawks to give me my money in the preseason. He said, show me the money, and it's paying dividends. The Seahawks are off to a 2-0 start with a 28-26 victory over Pittsburgh, who are now 0-2, and Big Ben Roethlisberger thinking about quitting. He says he still has some left in him, but I believe this with my spirit. It don't matter if I'm right or wrong, but there's no one to defend him now. Like you said earlier, it was all about Le'Veon Bell. It was all about Antonio Brown. That's why they couldn't win. It was all about Tomlin. Couldn't have control of the locker room. We told you Big Ben threw 8 interceptions combined in his last 2 playoff games, and now his arm hurts and he can't play. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about it, you start the season, and Ben Roethlisberger did not throw a touchdown pass in any part of the first 2 games that he played.
Nope.
He couldn't figure things out, Charlton. He overthrew receivers constantly, and like I said, there was nobody to blame between Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to say that those 2 parts of the Killer Bees were the distraction in the locker room.
Yeah.
It came down to Ben Roethlisberger, who was covered for by the media because the white quarterback could not be wrong.
Yeah.
And even though he blasted his teammates, Charlton, Now everything, it's like Malcolm X said, the chickens are coming back home to roost.
Yeah.
Who do they blame now?
Yeah, well, I guess Terry Bradshaw still wants to find a way to yell at Antonio Brown, but he was a great Steeler quarterback. You know, even though Gillum helped him get to the playoffs, I think went 11-1 and got replaced in the playoffs. But sometimes the truth is just the truth. That's why what we say, you can Google it. We're not partial. If we're wrong, we look pretty stupid. So you can Google that too. But Bradshaw should really come out and say Big Ben's season should be over, because they're going to talk about firing Tomlin if they don't make the playoffs for the second year in a row. You know it's going to happen. This team should be rebuilding, not trying to protect somebody. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, you can't blame a coach for when management makes trades of players. The Pittsburgh Steelers have had 3 coaches in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
This is not an organization that's quick to make change. They make changes with players, and you go through some down cycles. Bill Cowher went through a down cycle. Chuck Knowles went through a down cycle.
Right.
Right now, this is a situation where you have to find out who's going to be your quarterback for the future. James Conner has not been able to stay healthy at running back. They need to go out and find a number 1 receiver, because Juju Schuster is not a number 1. He's a number 2. He doesn't have the speed to get over the top. So the organization needs to make some moves, and it's going to start at quarterback. Will they find out if Rudolph is the guy to move forward with, or do they look forward to the draft?
Well, think about this guy, Big C. How about them Cowboys? A guy that all he does is win, win, win no matter what. Still doesn't have his money, even though he's going to get it. But if Jerry Jones is listening, and I know he has his minions that listen, if you could look around the league, you can see Goff with the Rams throw for less than 200 yards for the second game in a row. They gave him $120-something million. You got Garoppolo out in San Francisco, $137 million. Their defense is carrying them. You have guys like Cousins that can't throw the ball downfield, get this $84 million. And then you have Prescott, his own player. And think about this. A 31-21 win over the Redskins, division rival. 3 more touchdown passes. He had 1 interception that was actually tipped. It should not have been an interception. And then Zeke Elliott also got his groove on, 100-plus yards. But if you look at how good Prescott is playing, if you had that same kind of performance out of Cousins in Minnesota, you wouldn't have a team that would lose at home. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, if you look at 2 quarterbacks that were drafted ahead of him in the draft, Charlton, in the first round, you look at Carson Wentz in Philadelphia and the performance he had last night.
And they lost.
You look at Jared Goff in Los Angeles and the performance he had. You compare both of those to
Prescott,
Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
If Dak Prescott was white, the media would be saying he needs his money now.
Yesterday.
Why wait?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's as black and white as it gets.
Yeah.
Because he's not white, the media is not saying he needs his money now and he should be the highest paid.
Yep.
But we've talked about this constantly, how African-American players in the NFL have to hold out, they have to threaten, they have to demand to get a new contract. Where the owners have been very at ease in giving these white quarterbacks hundreds of millions of dollars guaranteed.
Crazy.
And saying that they're a franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
And yet they're not outplaying anybody. If you look at all these alleged elite quarterbacks, Charlton, that are making guaranteed $30+ million a year.
Wow.
And you look at Dak Prescott, don't look at the color, look at the statistics.
Yeah.
And tell me which one of those quarterbacks warrant the money.
And I would like to ask my white brethren, because they said the truth shall set you free. And I mean this. I know there's conversation that men of color will never be privy to. You have it behind closed doors, outside of the wink, wink, and we love you, that stuff we hear in public. But there is something nefarious that still happens behind closed doors. It's for white men in business. And even President Obama knew that as one of the most hated presidents in the history of this country for doing a great job for America, bringing us out of a great recession, Big C, and preventing one. There's something that goes on that still makes skin color and taking leadership from black men anathema to some men. No one can find anywhere in the sports world where you can win like Prescott and they make you beg for your money, and white guys who are stinking it up, throwing interceptions and losing games, they get $100 million contracts and no one says anything about it. That has to change. Big C, Chicago, think about this. It's amazing. I know that people can say what they want to say about Chicago and Denver, up in Denver, but I just think about this. In the end of the game, is Eddie Pinheiro kicked a 53-yard field goal, but the clock was already at 0. That's what I saw. And then they went back and said, no, we're going to add 1 second. Well, why not add 2 seconds to it? It gave the Bears a chance to get the win with the big field goal in Denver. The home team normally gets the benefit of the doubt. It was a gutsy call by Fangio to go for a 2-point conversion with 31 seconds earlier, and it gave them the lead. But you should not lose a game at home because they're adding time back onto the clock. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I attribute that to the Denver defense losing that game.
Yeah.
You got a receiver that catches the ball with 1 or 2 seconds to go. Why tackle him right away?
Let him go. Yeah.
If you're president about what the clock is, the defensive coordinator, Fangio was a defensive coordinator in Chicago.
Yeah.
Let him run. Let the clock run out. Let him try to get to the sideline. So I think about the defensive back, Harris, when he touched him down on the ground thinking that time had run out. No.
Yeah.
Let the time run out. That's what you do as a defensive player. I put that loss solely on the defensive coaching staff of Denver.
Yeah.
You let the clock, you let the player run, you don't go up and touch him, but when you touch him, he's allowed to call timeout.
Yeah.
So I put that loss on them, not the clock keeper.
Let me take you to, I know we already talked about Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, but think about last night's game in Atlanta. I don't remember the name of the offensive lineman that had an incredible block on a D-bleed that set Julio Jones free. And then he was able to race 53 yards for the touchdown. So everyone says, Matt Ryan back to pass, Julio Jones breaks and tackles, 53 yards and score. That offensive lineman is the player of the game for the Falcons. Also, their defensive player that stopped, I think it was Vickers for the Eagles. He caught the ball. He was about maybe a yard from the first down. It was a DB that came up and made the stop. Those were the two players of the game, but you wouldn't know it by media, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you always put the high praise on these quarterbacks because you got to give them all the credit for a win, but they're not giving them all the blame for a loss. They're always talking about the components around them. Julio Jones is a tremendous receiver, Charlton. He's somebody that you cannot cover one-on-one. You have to scheme to play against Julio Jones. He's that dominant of an athlete and a game changer.
Yep.
But Atlanta's defense stepped up last night. They were very punishing against the Philadelphia Eagles, Charlton. As I mentioned, the Philadelphia Eagles at one point lost 6 different offensive players throughout that contest. You're not going to compete in the NFL when you lose 6 offensive players. We saw that in the FIBA, World Basketball Championship, Charlton, with the U.S. putting in second-tier NBA players and not having the stars. They could not compete on the world stage, and that's how the NFL is. You go into a game with your lineup set. When you lose key components, it's very hard to compete, whether it's the quarterback, whether it's the running backs, or even the receivers.
Yeah, that's very true. Big C, the second battle, you think about this, the second battle of the week, former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, they stayed hot, and the game was close. I guess it wasn't as close as the score. But I look at Lamar Jackson, and they throttled Arizona. Kyler Murray, he good game also. Murray was 23, I think it was a 23-17, but it wasn't as close as the score in my opinion. Both quarterbacks passed for well over 300 yards, and Jackson again was 120 on the ground. It's amazing when you watch the changing of the NFL, this run play option, this pass option offense that people fought against. It's amazing when you get these guys another year or two. Imagine how dynamic they'll both be. Your thoughts?
Well, I look at this game in totality. When you think about the top 2 passing yardage quarterbacks in the NFL in week 2, you look at what both of these young men did in Jackson and Murray.
Yeah.
Murray passed for 349 yards in his second game in the NFL. He passed for 300 in his first game in the NFL. We know what Lamar Jackson did as far as setting Steelers records. I mean, not Steelers, but Raven records over the first 2 games of the season.
Yeah.
But the electrifyingness, Charlton, of these 2 young men who won the Heisman Trophy at the University of Louisville and Oklahoma to step into the NFL and start changing the landscape.
Yeah.
I know Murray has not won a game. He's 0-1-1. But the defense is going to have to step up in Arizona, and they did a much better job against the Ravens. Think about it. The Ravens scored 59 points the week before against the Dolphins.
Yeah.
The Ravens shaved 31 points off of that. I mean, the Cardinals shaved 31 points off of that defensively.
Yeah.
So this team is improving, and Kingsbury is showing that his offense does have potential in the NFL.
Yeah, they really do. Another quarterback, I mean, I don't care what people say about mustaches, but this Minshew kid for Jacksonville can play. But the Texans, Deshaun Watson, got a little help from his defense against the rookie quarterback in Gardner Minshew. The Texans stayed off the Jaguars 13-12. I know they tried to run the ball with their, all everything tailback, but I thought Minshew was the one that was getting them down the field. I would have loved to see if they're going to try to go for two, give it to the quarterback that could have run our pass, Big C, but a good win by, if you can call it a good win, by the Texans. Your thoughts?
Well, when you got Fournette in the backfield, Charlton, and you built your team with Maroney as a running team, that's what you expect for him to be able to pick up 2 yards. Minshew has played a lot better than what people have expected from a 6th-round draft pick, Charlton, in leading the Jacksonville offense. But the Texas defense finally showed up in this game, where they were just run all over by the New Orleans Saints.
Right.
Deshaun Watson needs a little more help from his offensive line to protect him, but it was a much-needed victory for the Texans, Charlton, to keep them in the top of their division.
Yeah, and I know we talked about the New Orleans. They don't want to be anywhere near Los Angeles. The refs blew another call. I mean, things just got out of hand. Drew Brees out for 6 weeks. The Rams, 27-9 victory. I thought that the L.A. Coliseum was rocking. It was a hot day in L.A., but there's something about, I know everybody wants something new. Everybody wants a new house, the new car, the new everything. But seeing that stadium packed like that, Big C, and the crowd noise they generated from the Coliseum, I thought that was great for L.A. because USC and UCLA aren't providing much excitement. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it was a typical California game, Charlton. I looked around, I saw a lot of empty seats there in the Coliseum. I mean, they had a decent crowd.
They were in the
restroom
think about
line. They reduced that stadium down to 76,000 seats, and they still only had a crowd of about 69,000 in there. So there's a lot of things going on in California that detract people from wanting to go to games.
Yeah.
The Rams showed themselves well at home, a much-needed victory in their division, because when you think about the West in the NFC, you have the Rams at 2-0, you have Seattle at 2-0, and you have San Francisco, amazingly, at 2-0. This division is going to be a dogfight all year long.
Big C, the Raiders. Think about this. The Raiders had a blazing hot first quarter against Kansas City. They were up 10-0, and people started thinking, wait a minute, they jumped on Denver the week before. Well, Denver doesn't know how to win games. And then they jumped on Kansas City, but all that did was make Patrick Mahomes mad. He went off in the second half. He had 4 touchdown passes, 278 yards, and Kansas City won 28-10 over the Raiders. But that was the last time that you'll ever see, I can't say ever, but ever see an NFL football game played on dirt, because they're going to be gone, I think, until November 13th is their next home game. And so that was the last NFL team that played on dirt. I know Monday night's game is being played tonight with Cleveland and also the Jets. They played a game on dirt way back in the day also with the infield. But this is the last time you'll see a dirt field, and Mahomes was there to kind of send the crowd home sad. Big, so your thoughts?
Well, Mr. Mahomes once again showed his mettle and what he is.
Yeah.
We talked about him getting a little, lackadaisical last week, missing a touchdown pass against Jacksonville.
Yeah.
He made up for it, Charlton. When you think about the second quarter that he played yesterday in Oakland, it was epic.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who put up 278 yards, 4 touchdowns in 1 quarter, Charlton.
Amazing.
And all of these touchdowns were in excess of 29 yards.
Yeah.
He was pinpoint passing. The Raiders had no answer for him, Charlton. And he just picked them apart. He used a wealth of receivers, Charlton, to produce those points. I mean, they went to sleep after the second quarter. Neither team scored any points after that.
Yeah.
But you have to be mesmerized with what the Kansas City Chiefs can do offensively. And now they have a defense that's backing up their offense.
Yeah, I really love NFL football. We've seen a lot of good games over the weekend. Never going to have perfect officiating, especially when the officials understand prop betting as well. Tonight, as we close out on Big C Sports Monday on our Monday Night Football game, I know Beckham goes back to New York. I think it's much ado about nothing. It's about the team, but I know they're going to build it about him going back home. And I just want to get your thoughts on what we're going to see tonight.
Well, what I look at this game tonight, Charlton, is the Jets are starting a veteran quarterback in Trevor Siemian, a guy who has 13 wins under his belt as an NFL starter. So I give him the advantage. You know, the Jets are beat up at receiver. Le'Veon Bell's a little banged up.
Yep.
But here's a team with Cleveland that the media gave a lot of unwarranted expectations because they made some offensive moves.
Yeah.
Everybody will go out and play Cleveland like it's a playoff game.
Yep.
And the thing about Cleveland is that you have no structural leadership. You got a guy who is a first-year head coach. You got a quarterback who is a real first-year starter. He started games last year, but now the team is his.
Yeah.
No pressure, behind him from a backup.
Right.
So that's the problem that you have with Baker Mayfield. He spent most of the offseason being cocky. He's not a manager of den, and he has a bunch of grown men around him with a bunch of egos.
Yeah.
I see what they did last week with the 3 interceptions he threw in the fourth quarter. So people say, well, he was pressing.
Right.
Well, that's him.
Yeah.
He's thinking that he's better than the guys that are being paid to play defense in the NFL. He has a young coach in Freddie Kitchens who doesn't have a grasp on all these mindsets on his offense, and he can't manage these grown men. I see the Cleveland Browns being in trouble tonight. You got to realize 50 years ago, these two teams played the first Monday night game in pro football history.
Yeah.
So there's some history about this. And Baker Mayfield's coming out party was last year on a Thursday night against the New York Jets.
Yeah.
I don't see that same Baker Mayfield because last year he was playing with a chip on his shoulder. This year he's playing with an attitude on his mind.
Yeah. And it's, as we always say, because there's no Sam Darnold, if you're going to kiss anybody, you got to ask them who they were kissing on before you took your turn in line. And an excuse for all the people at the Coliseum, and you can see some empty seats, Big C, there is something called the bathroom break. And they have those long stalls at the Coliseum. It's not modern like a lot of the new stadiums that have more restrooms. Sometimes you got to have 50 people waiting in the same line, if that makes any sense. So that's why sometimes you can't stay in the seat. You got to go to the restroom. I want to say you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the world on the #1 podcast in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can also follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. And we really like all of the things that are happening with Big C Sports. I want to close out tonight with Major League Baseball. We have in the AL, Baltimore at Detroit. You have Chicago White Sox at Minnesota. Kansas City's at Oakland. And then on the National League, San Diego at Milwaukee. Washington at St. Louis. You have the Mets at Colorado. Cincinnati at the Chicago Cubs. Miami at Arizona. So a lot happening in sports. And I just want to bring up something. Major League Baseball teams that have already clinched a berth in the National League. You have the Braves, the Dodgers, the Washington Nationals, and then you have the Cardinals or the Cubs. And then you look at the AL, Houston, Minnesota, the Yankees, and then maybe the A's. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, baseball, has had a heated summer, and you look at these teams that are clinched. They're trying to stay healthy, so that they can get into the playoff run. And you got a couple wild card teams. You got the A's. But when you talk about the last game being played in the Coliseum on that dirt infield, that may not happen, may not come to fruition. If the A's can advance into October, there will still be dirt in the infield the next Raiders game.
Isn't that something, Big C? That would make the A's happy, but maybe not the Raiders. Atlanta Braves second-year outfielder Raul Acuna Jr. is on pace to be the next 40-40 man in baseball. He had 39 home runs, 36 stolen bases, with 14 games remaining. Big C, I think he'll get it. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about how rare that feat is in Major League Baseball. I mean, the first guy that I remember doing it did it out there in the San Francisco area, and that was Bobby Bonds, Barry Bonds' dad. Yeah. He was a 40-40 man when I was younger, Charlton, watching baseball. But to see a young man in his second year in the league, Jose Canseco also accomplished that with the Oakland A's.
Yep.
But Raul Acuna Jr. is one of those special talents that we haven't seen in Major League Baseball for a long time, Charlton. And I'm looking forward to seeing the young man get to that 40-40 plateau.
I'm sure he's looking forward to it, too. Last story of Major League Baseball, Chicago Cubs. The Cubs win. Offensive outburst over the weekend makes history at Wrigley Field. The Cubs offense scored 31 runs in the first 2 games of the series versus the Pirates, and 16 more on Sunday, giving them a total of 47 runs, breaking the old record of 44 runs set back in 1930. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you think about the offensive productivity of the Chicago Cubs, maybe the Chicago Bears need to give them a call and find out how you can score so many points because they haven't been doing it. But the Cubs are right on the heels of the St. Louis Cardinals, Charlton, in the Central Division, vying for that last playoff spot.
Yep. Well, it's all fair in love and war. I love the sports universe. Can't wait to see what happens tonight on Monday Night Football. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Charlton, in this day of society where we got these overpaid, big, egotistical coaches in college and professional football, I want to give out a shout-out to Tony Bennett of the University of Virginia, who won the national championship in men's college basketball. Tony Bennett was offered a raise by the University of Virginia, and he turned it down, Charlton. He said he would like to see that money go to his staff and other athletic programs in the university. So when you talk about a seminal moment from a coach to say, I'm not here about the greed, I'm here about the growth of the young men and to help out those who assist them, Tony Bennett gets an A+ for the University of Virginia.
Well, I tell you, not only does he get an A+ for the University of Virginia, he gets an A+ for the universe. And you can get an A+ too every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.